Guys, my name is Ankush Gaurav and I welcome you to Contour series. This tutorial is in continuation with the early one where we learned how to develop this REST API, means a REST API which demands clients to make put kind of request on it. The clients who are going to make use of this API are also supposed to be specifying the name of a specific student whose record they want to modify. And in addition to that, they're also supposed to be sending the information with which they want this record to be modified at the server side. So for this kind of REST API, in the previous tutorial, we included this REST API controller method. And how this REST API controller method works? Well, when someone is going to make a request using this REST API, the request is going to come here at this REST API controller method, and this path variable annotation is simply going to extract the value of student name from this REST API and assign the same to student name. And this request body annotation is simply going to perform the task of mapping this information to the properties of student object. And then later part of this API controller method is simply performing the job of updating this specific student's record into the database with this object's values, with the information which has come along with the request. And whatever I've just described in a very brief manner, I explained in detail in the last tutorial. Now let's proceed further and try to understand how to test this REST API and also try to understand the meaning of content type request header, which client has to make use of while making a request for this kind of REST API. All right, so let's start. So to test this REST API, let's go to Postman and here type the REST API, which is going to match with the pattern of this request mapping annotation. So here I'm supposed to be making put kind of request on it. So let's choose here put type. And now here I'm supposed to be also sending the information with which I would want to modify this specific student's record. And because this application supports two kind of formats, JSON and XML. So these are JSON related jars and this is XML related jar. So because this application supports JSON as well as XML format, so here I have a choice that while making this request, I would choose either of these formats to specify the information with which I would want to modify this record at the server side. So here for specifying the information, I would need to go to this body tab. And here I can write information in JSON or XML. Let's go with JSON first and later I would show with XML also. So this is how to write JSON message. So let's say I want to modify student name of John with a value John1. And I also want to modify the hobby. So right now, let's say John has a hobby, WWE, wrestling, and I want to change it to computer science. So here we have developed the whole message in JSON format. Now when I'm going to make put request on this REST API with this information, what's going to happen? The request is going to reach this REST API controller method. But here the problem is, for request body annotation to work, means to map this information to the properties of student object, this needs to know in what format that information has sent by the client. So for this to work properly, client also needs to send along with the request the information about, in what format it has specified this information. So because we have specified this information in JSON format, so here I would need to include a header with key as content type with its value as application/JSON. So if client is specifying here information in JSON format, then client is going to choose value of content type as application/JSON. And if by any chance client is providing information in XML format, in that case client is going to choose here XML instead of JSON. So let's choose JSON, as we have here this message in JSON format. So now our whole message is ready. So now what's going to happen when I'm going to make a put request on this REST API with this information, with this metadata, the request is going to come here to this REST API controller method, and here path variable annotation is simply going to extract this student's name, means it's going to extract John and is going to assign the same to student name. And request body annotation would know from this content types value that this message is actually in the JSON format. So what it's going to do, it's going to make use of JSON related jars which we have included onto the class path of this project to map values of this message to the properties of this student object. And once it is done, then this method is simply going to update this student's record into the database with the values of this student object, with the information which client has sent to this REST API controller method. So that's how this whole REST API works. So let me very quickly show you how this is going to work. So here, let me press the send button. Cool. So here I've got this response because of this return value. So here we just understood how a REST API works, which demands clients to make put kind of request on it. Now let's change here this JSON message to its equivalent XML message. So how to do that? Well, this is how to write XML equivalent of this message. /student, I have to write tag for this. Then I have to modify student name, so I would write a tag for that as well here. Student_name. Here I'm supposed to be specifying the name with which I want John's information to be modified at the server side. So I want John's name to be modified to John1. And then let me write over here student hobby. Student hobby, and here let me specify computer science. So here I want John's hobby to change from wrestling to computer science. So here I'm done. Now because this message is now present in the XML format, so here I have to make a change for the value of content type header. I have to specify here XML. So now after this change, what's going to happen when I'm going to make a put request on this REST API with this information and this metadata? Well, this REST API controller method is simply going to extract the value of name from this REST API, assign the same to student name, and request body annotation would know from content type key that this message is in the XML format. So it's going to make use of XML related jars to convert this message into its equivalent Java object, that is the student object. And rest, it's simply going to update this student's record with these values of student object. So here in this tutorial we learned how to make use of content type header to convey to the server that whatever message you are sending along with the request is actually present in which format, XML, JSON, or any other format. And accordingly, the REST API controller method is going to make use of that message to proceed further. Guys, in the next tutorial, I will show you how to make use of consumes argument with request mapping annotation. All right, guys, a big thank you for learning REST API concepts using Spring MVC framework with me. If you have any feedback or comments, please provide them below the video or simply write to me using this email ID. Please hit the like button if you really like this video, and do not forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel Gone to Series. And I'm gonna catch you in the next part of this tutorial.